everyone, my name's Danielle. I'm a writer, a reader, I'm a student. Today I wanted to talk to you about a fun thing called psychic distance or narrative distance. Tomato, tomato. One common aspect that I see within a lot of amateur writers, quite frankly, is a lack of understanding about psychic distance. Actually, it remains to be one of the main reasons why I could never get into fanfiction. I've tried. It appears in traditionally published fiction as well. And of course, it does stick out like a sore thumb to me. It is also what makes a lot of writing feel basic. Short, psychic distance is how close the audience is to the narration and the character. I find it quite difficult to explain psychic distance. Additionally, I find it difficult to understand a lot of writing elements without clearly seeing how it's done. So I'll be reading you like a little section from The Art of Fiction by John Gardner. It is a fantastic example of psychic distance that is going from like super far away to getting closer and closer. So number 1, it was winter of the year 1853. A large man stepped out of the doorway. Number 2, Henry J. Warburton had never much cared for snowstorms. 3, Henry hated snowstorms. 4, God, how he hated these damn snowstorms. Number 5, snow. Under your collar, down inside your shoes, freezing and plugging up your miserable soul. When we look at all of that, it feels like the camera is super far away and it's focusing more and more and more onto Henry, our main character, at least in the moment. See, we have this gorgeous landscape of a snowstorm, and we zoom in onto him, and then we learn his name, and then we learn to see his first name. We're on a first name basis with the main character. And we focus on his face, and soon enough, we are inside Henry. And then the next one, we are Henry, and the next one, we are feeling what Henry is feeling.
Hello everyone, editing Danny here. I forgot to add this part. I also wanted to add that because the camera is focusing in, usually what will happen is that the author will start out far away from the character, and then as we learn more about the character, the camera slowly starts to focus in on that character. You might start off the chapter with describing the scene first. It was a sunny day, and Amber walked out into the hot air. If you did Amber walked into the hot air, it was a sunny day. The reason why it feels weird is because your psychic distance is going super duper focused and it is unfocusing out. Like I said, this is a primary reason why I had such a hard time trying to find fan fiction that I enjoyed. So for example, they might say, Percy Jackson walked into the room. The green-eyed boy sat down at the table. The reason why that feels weird is because we are focusing in on this character. We know his full name. We are very close. And then the green-eyed boy, we zoom out. And then in the next line, they might go back to referring to Percy by his first name, and then we zoom back in. It's jarring. It goes in, out, in, out. The rule, or the expectation, I should say, is that you start out super far away, and then you get close, and then as the closer you go, you don't go farther back. Of course, there's exceptions to the rules if you're trying to make the audience feel distant from the character, but the important part is if you are doing it on purpose, and if you believe that it is justified by the stylistic choice.
So to me, it seems that in most of today's fiction, the point of view is very much leaning towards third-person limited. What the mainstream audience likes will obviously change over time. The Epic of Gilgamesh has some very different psychic distance compared to Harry Potter. In narrative distance, think of it like a family tree of sorts. You have narrative distance, that is the father of everything. So then we have things like physical distance, psychological distance, intellectual distance. For example, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. The narrator is not the main character. However, the narrator is Death. So Death and this main character are not the same person. However, because they are separate entities, there remains to be a degree of narrative distance between the two. In my experience, it is far easier to manipulate psychic distance when you're writing from a third-person point of view. So I am someone that has always felt way more comfortable writing in first-person point of view. It is what I have mostly written in. Additionally, it is also what a lot of people in my generation have consumed when it comes to books because of YA literature mostly being written in first-person point of view. Why? I'm not quite sure. Topic for another video. I've noticed that once you commit to a first person point of view, You can only zoom out so much because the camera is eternally focused on the main character. Additionally, you are seeing it through their eyes. You can't zoom out much more than that main character, and that could be a good or a bad thing. Experienced writers will take this into account. But writing isn't about following the rules, it's about breaking them in a strategic way. So I want to give you an example of how I purposely manipulated psychic distance in my novel and broke the rules, but why I believe that it's justified. So, for context, our main character, Blessica, has since ran into an old colleague of hers. She says the following: he was an old classmate that graduated a year above me. Frankly, I forgot he existed. So, in this one sentence, Blessica, our main character sees a man. She doesn't know who he is. He's familiar. There's a sense of, oh, I've met you before. I knew your face before, but she didn't know him then, she doesn't know him now. So this is a familiar experience that most of us can relate to. Running into an old person of a friend of a friend of a friend that we should know, we don't really. So this actively forces the audience to emphasize with Blessica, they are being put in her shoes, and thus the psychic distance is already very close and personal. So in the next section, Jessica and Riz are both not in the greatest moods. However, they're both trying to be civil. Quote, I took in a deep breath, then pushed my empty glass to him. He obliged and filled it with water. An unspoken apology. End quote. With this very short and a few sentences of information, we learn quite a lot about Riz's personality in the first place. Riz is not petty. He does not need to hear Blessica verbally say, I am sorry, in order to move the conversation along and let bygones be bygones. Riz is very empathetic. He's in tune with her emotions and her body language. He doesn't need to gloat. It was very important to me to ensure that the audience learns about Riz at the same rate that Blessica learns about him. The audience learns that Blessica doesn't want to verbally say, I am sorry, and that she would rather that she lets Riz fill up her glass, doesn't think about it anymore. She doesn't want to physically say, I am sorry, after they have both been in a horrible mood and rude to each other. Additionally, the camera kind of cuts from Riz back to Blessica as the audience is starting to learn more about her. This is in the first chapter. So in the next section, Blessica feels Riz kind of looking her up and down, evaluating her, is what I'm going to say. And she's thinking, and I quote, his eyes slanted up when he smiled, which was always. His hands were beautiful, fine and delicate from a lifetime of study. End quote. So it's only at the end of the chapter do we get any physical description of Riz. Blessica is now starting to admire him. I can understand why someone would try and correct me and say that wouldn't it make more sense for Blessica to notice Riz's physical appearance first? Yes, but I explained that at near the end of the chapter, where she's thinking the following, and I quote, I knew he was handsome in the same way I knew the sky was blue, but that's where my appreciation ended. End quote. She is very matter of fact. She didn't tell the audience about Riz's physical appearance because to her, it didn't seem important enough. Everyone knows the sky is blue. Everyone knows a man like Riz is handsome. So what's the point in stating the obvious? So this is when we discover that Blessica is 100% an unreliable narrator. If she doesn't care enough to give this small detail, in her opinion, we as the audience know that it's pretty damn important to physically describe side characters. What else does she not care enough to tell the audience? So because we are seeing the world through her eyes, we are seeing a world full of her own personal biases, superstitions, beliefs, and judgment. The act of me breaking the quote-unquote rules of psychic distance is for the explicit purpose of showcasing Blessica's personality to the audience. It's a stylistic choice. Whether it's a good stylistic choice to break the rules is up to interpretation, obviously. I think I did a good thing. But I have no bias whatsoever. Everything I say is true. Right, Lilia?
Yes.
Yes. So Blessica doesn't care enough to describe Riz's physical appearance because quite frankly, she could not care less. She's just that aloof. So this is my own stylistic choice, and I'm using this as an example to show that yes, you can break the rules. You should break the rules. Writing is all about breaking the rules. However, it should be done with the explicit purpose of what? Of what, Lilia? You don't know? I don't know. I was just going on that thought. Sometimes I just say something and hope I find it. Maybe I'll
Find it eventually.
Yeah. So, yes, you can break the rules, but you have to learn about them in the first place. If you're gonna break the rules, you should be doing it purposefully and to contribute to your stylistic choice and just personalize your author voice, etc., etc. Writing is creative. Yeah, writing is creative. Literally, there are no chiseled commandments in writing, but there are expectations for a reason. And your audience is more clever than you give them credit for. More often than not, your audience will be able to realize that a quote unquote wonky psychic distance is done purposefully versus you just genuinely don't know a thing about psychic distance. So, psychic distance is difficult to explain, difficult to teach, difficult to learn, and even more difficult to master. Psychic distance just so happens to be one of my favorite writing aspects, and it's also incredibly creative how writers will purposefully manipulate psychic distance in order to contribute to the overall story. So in the description, I'll be adding this works cited and consulted so that you guys can go see the resources that I've used to learn about psychic distance. Hopefully it'll help you guys out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for learning about psychic distance and narrative distance. If you want to see more of my stuff, I'm trying to post new videos every Monday. I am also on Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc. You can find me anywhere. My handle is Danielle Mamaro. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.